This week on the show, we have translator, localizer, voice director, and CEO of Dragonbaby.com, Jeremy Blaustein.
So where do you guys stand in the MGS Kojima community? I mean, tell me about, maybe, I don't know, if you want to do this online, we can do it online. I don't know.
Sure. Hey, I'm Fingers.
Hey everyone, this is Days Ahead.
And I'm Nitroid. You're listening to the Kojima Frequency.
I'm Fingers. I do a lot of Metal Gear remixes
I know.
and covers.
I know that.
Yeah, I've sent a few your way. I think you've seen a couple of them, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm known for. I manage a Facebook page that's called Solid Snake. We've got like over 110,000 people on there. I've been running that for the past 8 years and just sharing memes and artwork and just trying to source and credit all the artists that anytime we post something, if I don't know the source of it, I'm not posting it and sharing it because I think artists deserve credit and should be sourced and all that. So that's kind of how I got into the Metal Gear community. And then I actually met Nitroid. He was commenting on a post that had something to do with dominant and recessive genes and stuff, and he came in and corrected us.
You're gonna embarrass me because I came in with some nerd shit.
Well, no, I'm saying you knew your shit and you corrected the whole thread, and everybody was like, and that's why I was like, actually, yeah, Nitroid's right. It was like, oh shit.
I need better things to do with my time.
Well, Ryan's got that crazy icon photo that is so memorable. You see that thing and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, that just, and the name Nitroid, it's just like, that's like rock star level, I don't know, association.
That's
to me.
sticks, sure, yeah.
It's very strong.
It's a high praise.
Somebody did a 3D rendering of that icon recently, and it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like I kind of hate it, but it's like hate that it's the kind of hate that goes into the amazeballs territory.
You loved it.
Well, I have to say that the drawing was done by a guy named Tom Waterhouse at 2dforever.com. He's a really good artist. And he did this funny picture, and I was like, hey, can I use that? Because it makes me laugh every time I see it.
It's like Snake with like after he ate like a big pizza or something like that.
Isn't it a 3-piece like the original? It's like him and then and then he does that and then he's old after it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's called Metal Gear Senile.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, I mean, you and I have crossed paths before. I'm guessing you might remember back in, I think 2007, we did a podcast and talked about a number of things, and that sort of took off and ended up on Kotaku and a few other blogs at the time. I mean, this is a while back, so I don't know if you remember it.
What was the year here?
Around 2007, I want to say.
Man, that's way back. Is this Ryan talking?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
2007, and it went on Kotaku in 2007. No, I can't say I really remember what that is. You mean it went on as a blog or?
Yeah, it was. We did a podcast with a friend of mine named Jim. It was called Push to Talk for MetalGearSolid.org.
Oh, Ryan, so you're from that. No, I certainly remember that. I mean, it's all over YouTube still, like in 12 parts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time he wants to send it, I'm like, send it in parts. Yeah.
And I had a really bad cold that day.
No, that's that was the first podcast I ever did, associated with this kind of, with fans and such. I really, I don't want to say I regret some of the things I said, but first of all, I think I certainly was unscripted.
Yeah, and I sent you a message a while back too, where I'll just say again, I'm sorry if that got you into any sort of trouble.
No, it didn't.
Like I said, we can cut this out.
It did not. My New York accent really sounds off the charts though on that one. I'm like, yeah, I worked with Kojima for a while. Sure, yeah. Let me tell you about Kojima.
Apparently you guys had like cracked a few cold ones before the interview, so that might have been a factor.
I don't remember. Maybe.
Who knows?
But that was pretty memorable for me back then because, I was still sort of a young kid and talking to somebody who worked on this game I liked so much. But now, like, your whole story has been told so many times now. I'm sure you're getting tired of recanting it at this point.
Well, yeah, in a way. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about it, And, to be honest with you, at the time I was to 2007. And so I was going from a period of being like a super, super, super hot translator, doing like everything, transitioning to, hey, why am I translating, what would be a typical game that was like, so unwell, like Sword Art Online for some fucking studio in LA, and so I was trying to drum up a little bit of interest. I wasn't really sure how I could get relevant again. So I thought, okay, I'll talk about that kind of stuff. But it's been 13 years since then, and so I've gone through some stuff since then, and now I'm looking pretty good, but not really as a translator individually anymore. I started a translation company.
I was about to say you've expanded like completely and started up Dragonbaby, right?
Yeah, indeed, and it's going pretty well, I must say, and it's pretty enjoyable.
Yeah,
I dig the logo. Every time I see that, I'm like, man, that's a good logo.
Thanks. There was that was a Twitter connection.
I think I was the connection that connected you to that guy, actually. Now that I think about it, I remember that, yeah.
Were you really?
Yeah, I knew the guy.
Thank you.
He sent me some pins that he had designed, and he was just doing some great design work at the time. And then I happened to see Jeremy post, like, hey, just looking for some designers. I was like, dude, go hit up Jeremy Blaustein. And he
That's
did.
insane.
And it was a match. Like, he cranked it out quick.
We're so connected.
Yeah.
We're like cosmically connected. That's amazing. Anyway, so yeah, I love the logo. I thought he did a fucking great job. Great job. And so anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm 55 years old now, so it's like, you don't want me like translating, I'll be like that Buscemi.
Hello, fellow kids.
Yeah, I'm like, hello, fellow kids. I don't know.
I was actually going to ask you about that. Like, as soon as you said, I'm older, I was wondering if that was because you're afraid of not being able to have like a.
Yeah, I'm afraid that I can't pretend that I'm a teenager talking as a teenager. Yeah, I'm afraid.
Exactly.
Of that. Yeah.
Like it would be you feel it's like anachronistic, if you will.
Yeah, it's beyond fear. It's reality,
Yeah.
And also I can't really pretend, I can't hold up the illusion that I'm like all over every single game, like, well, did you guys like, I busted out my PS Vita, played some retro this morning. I did some retro gaming. And then in the afternoon, it's like, no, I mean, I run a company and I have kids and I don't have time to be like playing all these games and stuff like that. I play a few games, but they're like old guy games.
Yeah.
But there's people my age that, are still like, they invested so heavily in this, this image of being like gamers. But the thing is, there's also professionals in the industry and it is a profession. And so there's this kind of massive confusion though because it's games, right? Whether we're talking about translators or whatever, because it's games, people think that you got to be like, all geeked out and like a gamer and stuff like that. But
that's sorry, I keep disrupting.
No, it's fine.
That's something we talk about a number of times in this show, is that there seems to be a clear line between what gamers quote unquote expect as far as the industry. They expect, like bombastic personalities and company actions that, are like something out of an anime, when the reality is, this is still like a professional business. This is still a company. They have to be sustainable. They have to have sustainable practices.
Right.
They're not going to swoop in and acquire a company because it would make for a good story. Like there has to be some backing to it.
Fuck Konami, they broke up the Silent Hill team.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make that example, but
they were the perfect team, and they were like brothers. They were like the band of brothers.
I like that PSM review that you posted because I remember that. I remember being a little apprehensive about the game when that review came out. But
Yeah, and
now everybody acts like it's like timeless. I don't know.
Well, it's romanticizing everything.
right when in Konami, we looked at that in the office. The team looked at that. Of course, they looked at that.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh my God," they didn't like it. And the way development schedules go is they had to start developing right away for the next one. And so what they start drawing up is plans to avoid the mistake that they made in Silent Hill 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Just hearing that statement in 2021.
It is the straight up truth. I swear to God.
Stabbed you in the heart.
Yeah. That's why Silent Hill 3 is like, we've got to get back to the lore. And they're like, what? But this lore, it doesn't actually make any sense, because when we did Silent Hill 1, we didn't think it was going to be like, we were just throwing shit up against the wall, So now Silent Hill 3, we got to like make it all make sense. So
connect the dots, if you
yeah,
will.
and the fans think, it's part of some kind of like, complete, loric,
like some master plan.
Yeah, like Tolkien had written the game, and there's like, 50 years of developing the world of Silent Hill and the lore of Silent Hill, and it's not like that at all.
We just made it up as we went. Yeah.
So sorry.
On that same note, I mean,
sorry. I hope I didn't. Hope I didn't poop in anybody's punch bowl.
No. This is actually a perspective that I was really interested in, because that's something that has kind of been sort of a blocker in my mind for a while, was literally that PSM review and then how Silent Hill 2 is perceived now. So, that just opened my eyes. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
So on that note, Days and I both work in software development. So when we see this sort of romanticizing around the development process, it's kind of funny to us, because we while we don't work in game development, we do work in a similar environment where it just sort of like, this is not how it typically goes. It's not some magical, like, this is not Willy Wonka's chocolate factory here,
right,
guys.
It's not, especially translation, let me tell you.
Well, with regards to translation, I mean, has the process changed dramatically since?
Yeah, it has.
Back when you were at Konami versus what it is now, I'd assume with as fast paced as things have become, that's got to be quite a bit more difficult now.
I don't know if I would use the word difficult. I mean, there's certain things have become more difficult, and a lot of things have become easier. But on the other hand, them becoming easier doesn't. It's like it's easier to, unify and make everything, perfect. There's all these tools and stuff like that, but it doesn't help you, in a way. It's become much more rationalized. Okay, it used to be.
Do they still send you scripts out of context?
Yeah, right. So I mean, so those problems still exist, but that happens rarely. That actually doesn't happen anymore. What I want to say is that back then you might get a PDF, or you might get an Excel file, or you might get a Word file. Like, what format should we do this in? And oh my God, this has code in it. Now there's computer assisted translation software. It tags the code and puts it here, or it keeps the glossary, or it keeps the term bases, and you can export and import these into different languages and blah blah blah, all these things.
Yeah.
So it's rationalized, and the amazing thing now is that even a young translator who's been doing it, doing games for only a couple years, they've grown up in a world where they're using this CAT software, and they know all the best practices for localizing games, and so they're really professional. They're super professional.
Yeah.
Whereas, I've been doing this for 25 years, which means that for me, at year 20 or year 18 or whatever, I had to start learning, these new tricks, and I'm already an old dog.
Yeah.
So,
And they're growing up with that software, so they're just like learning the process that way, and it's just like,
yeah.
I see that with like a lot of like the old heads with like music and stuff. They're you know they're talking
Exactly.
about just like tracking music the old way with analog equipment, and then you got these you got these damn kids just
Yeah.
ripping their MP3s and got your digital EQs and
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I can get the not animosity, but I can get the like, man, back when we did it, like we had to go and do it all of this way, and it was like much more of a process where you're just literally clicking export and there's your song now. It's like, damn
Yeah.
it, I wish
Right.
I had this when I can't tell if it's like I wish I had this when I was growing up or like, oh, the analog old way is the true good way.
It's exactly
you
like
can't,
that
you
because
can't impede innovation like that, really.
yeah. Yeah, because the thing is, sometimes when you're working within limitations, it's those things that draw out the best in you.
Mhm.
You have to take the extra steps to get something done, and in that you find creativity.
Exactly.
Though it does seem like there's a kind of homogeneity that's coming out of everyone having access to the exact same tools, the
Oh.
exact same libraries, at least in terms of music, where things are getting very samey.
That's exactly the same too in what we do because now the new sort of bunch of translators that do games, they're all young people that grew up watching anime,
Hmm.
or they're inspired by this localization or that localization. I love the translation of this, and so I became a translator. So guess what? I drew all my influences from past translations or from anime
Yeah.
and stuff like this. And so I think you get a kind of a sameness. It's sort of like, I guess in audio recording, using what is that? That auto.
Oh, auto-tune. Yeah, you just
Auto-tune,
get a lot of that
auto-tune,
same sound. Yeah.
So-
yeah, and with drums and stuff, everybody's using the same sample
Yeah.
packs and shit. It's like, hey, that's snare number 9 in the terror pack. Like, it's like, oh, great.
Right.
I was
right.
thinking about
Right.
the example in my head was like, I don't know if you guys see them, but if you look at some mobile games, like they all use the same Unity assets. So like you'll see the same like anime warrior in like a puzzle game as you would in like an anime boob action game. It's kind of funny.
I never noticed that, but now you're getting really, really deep into issues. I think important issues about. It's like you could go all the way down the rabbit hole with this conversation and talk about historically video games. Was there a peak moment when, like, let's imagine this is 2 points on a graph, and you've got at the beginning of it, you've got hand-drawn pixels, which take all this time to do, right?
Mhm.
And on the other side, you've got all this Unity, pre-made, 3D art assets that you can just pick up off the website. Okay, I need a old rocking chair. Okay, got the rocking chair. And so you get the sameness. And the users think they're getting this incredible, photorealistic, stuff. And it is photorealistic. Oh my God, I can see the pores on this dude's nose hair,
Yeah.
But it's like, and those work well when you're selling a game or you're making a YouTube video, But when you're playing at, when you're fighting a boss, can you actually see its fucking hair swinging? I would say no, you can't see that. So then what's actually going on? Do you feel that your connection with the game or the connection between your actions, pressing the button to make something happen, is that connection enhanced by having, little follicles of hair moving while you're fighting an end boss? And I think that we passed that point long, 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 long ago. I don't want to sound like an old fogey, but I really don't think it's, it makes any
We're
sense.
hitting diminishing returns on it.
What's
a
the
bit,
term?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, diminishing returns.
Yeah, PS5, PS6, PS7,
Yeah, it's been weird. Like this has been the first generation that the consoles have been out, and they've been out for close to a year now, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. Like I just nothing is really drawing me to any of it, and it's like the graphics aren't the thing. Like the fast loading time's great, but it's just like the core games that I really want to play. It's like that's not why I'm here. Like I don't know. I'm not in a rush to buy the new systems.
That's why there's been such a renaissance in indie games lately, because those are the guys that don't have as many resources and have to rely on creativity and innovation to get their stuff out there.
It's true. It's just that it's so hard to go back now,
Yeah. And there are plenty of games that are like returning to retro and like, you know, they're like, hey, this is like a Super Nintendo era looking game, but we did it a little better and we
It's
don't have
hard.
the limitations. So it's like, I mean, that's like the, you know, Super Nintendo, PlayStation 1, that's like the golden era for me. So it's like when they try to go for that, it's like, you're on track. Good job.
But we're all ruined. We're ruined. Did you ever try to watch try to watch a movie from like the late 60s, you know? It's like even good movies, it's like you can't watch it anymore because the number of cuts, you know, and that kind of thing. The tempo is so different than what we've become addicted to now.
Yeah, our attention span these days is half a second, and then we're checking our phones if we're not. Yeah, it's all like Marvel movie popcorn level. Where it's just bam, 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 bam. And you've got the old style of like the long cuts. You know, that was definitely more the style back then.
So Jeremy, I hope this doesn't make you feel old. I know it makes me feel old, but since the last time we did a podcast, I've had 2 boys. Who the oldest of which is going to be turning 13 this year.
That should make you feel old, man.
And they hate Metal Gear. They hate it when he talks about it.
Yeah, one of them's Solidus.
And you know, it's
one's Solidus and the other.
You know, I wonder. We haven't had the third yet. I don't know if we're going to go down that route.
Yeah.
But it does sort of remind me, though, when I try to show them some of the older movies or games or music that I'm into, you know, I do sort of get the, you know, Dad, that's so old. Why should I be interested in that? And it's not easy to impart that appreciation into kids. I mean, you can expose your kids to things and try not to force it on them, but at the end of the day, they're going to have their own tastes. And so all of these things that I'm interested in, all these old bands and movies and games, they just don't really seem to have an interest in for the most part.
And video games are like a whole level, like a whole tier, I think, in terms of that like discrepancy between generations, because you also have the aspect of engaging with it. It's not just, you know, the style of filming or
passive experience.
Right. It's an active. So it's like, you know, it's one thing to have a difference in terms of like that passive entertainment. Like if something is filmed differently, if something is a little more antiquated visually, it's another thing to have that level of engagement where, you know, if a child from this generation is not used to the way a PlayStation 1 3D character moves, then, you know, you can only get so far with them.
Yeah. It is hard to go back, even like myself, to play older games where it's like, oh, these controls are kind of weird. Like, I guess I remember how I did it back in the day, but they've definitely progressed in a way that's like a positive way to where it's like a regression to go back and play the older games.
My kids are always going to be able to watch the newer Marvel movies or whatever, but if I try to sit one of them down and watch the Maltese Falcon, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and same thing's going to happen to them. You know, there'll be a guy with a dad bod wearing a grunge T-shirt. You know, son, this is Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine, the greatest band ever. And they're watching TikTok, and they're like, "Fuck."
Oh god, yeah, I don't let them use TikTok. Stuff's evil.
Yeah, like, and my dad grew up, you know, playing games in the arcade. Like, you know, there's an old picture of him with like an afro playing Joust in the 80s or whatever. But
that's awesome.
Your dad sounds awesome, man.
Yeah, but like when it got to, you know, when the controllers got, you know, dual analog sticks, it just got to be like too much. Like that was just like the evolution that kind of kicked him out. So
did you guys ever see like the original like Ultima, for example, on the PC? Like, you know,
yes,
all right, yeah. So put that image in your head, okay? Put that image in your head. You know, you're pressing the arrow keys, and this fucking thing is, you know, that's made out of like 2 pixels is moving around, and you know, and you think it's a warrior with a fucking sword, you know, and now that would be, you know, ridiculous and unplayable and all these things. I mean, I played Zork. I enjoyed Zork. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So
the word-based game, yeah.
So what's going on? You know, what's going on is that there's a representation, you know, that exists in your mind between the thing that's on the screen is only a representation. It was only ever supposed to be a representation. It wasn't supposed to look exactly like, you know, like better than your imagination.
Yeah.
Now it's gone the other way, you can't imagine anything because you can already see, its eyes aren't blue, they're green,
Mm-hmm.
So, and everybody looks
Sorry,
like like The Last of Us. Oh, this is, this character is, it's this actress, and
What I'm hearing is that we're all spoiled.
I don't know what it is, but I think that this issue of representation and the interplay between the symbolic, the representation and what's going on in your mind, that surely must be gone now, right? And that seems to me to be a big issue, a big difference between games now and right?
It's anathema to imagination.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot less left to the imagination these days versus you just had to go, all right, those 4 squares and 2 rectangles. Yep, that's a guy with a sword. Got it.
I don't even know if I would call it spoiled though, because it's like I miss being able to exhaust my imagination. Like the example that comes out of my head is Silent Hill. I don't think Silent Hill 1 could have worked on a newer console. That whole like aesthetic with the PlayStation 1 graphics and the lack of polygons, like that fits that sort of like, and Jeremy, I apologize if this was not the tone you guys were going for, but it fits that very like B movie grindhouse like tone that I appreciated, that I played through.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm a survival horror fiend and I just haven't been able to get into a lot of survival horrors lately because there's not much left to the imagination.
Exactly. It's just, I think your mind fills in the blanks, and that's the bottom line. The mind fills in the blanks. And
right. And your mind will always think of something scarier than what the designer is. And that's not an indictment on the designer.
Yeah. And so if there's no blanks, then, right?
Yeah. Then you have Metal Gear Solid 4. Yep.
There is a community out there now that has been growing by leaps and bounds called Haunted PS1. And they've been inspired by it's a group of independent developers who have been inspired by those classic survival horror PlayStation 1 games, and they make games that are intentionally retro in that style to try and explore like what else can we do in those in those restrictions. What other ideas can we come up with? And they've come up with a lot of pretty creative stuff.
Tell them to contact me.
So I mean, there's still people who appreciate it. There's sort of been like a second renaissance for those old low poly style games.
That's great.
Yeah, same with like the hyper like first person shooters where it's just that like old school, like Quake style almost, or just like Duke Nukem era.
On that note, I got to ask you this. I've wanted to ask you this for a while, and if we don't have to get into it if you don't want to, so we can cut this out if you want. But I wanted to ask you about Blackmore.
Oh, okay.
And if there was any hope of seeing that again.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Game development it's a really risky thing, and Kickstarter is also, man, it's a whole
Kickstarter's a crapshoot at best.
Yeah, it's not just that it's a crapshoot. There's this whole social dimension too to it that, it's like inviting yourself into, I don't know, opening yourself up to potential, nastiness. We've all seen the things that sometimes happen with Kickstarter campaigns,
Right.
Yeah.
There's no like there can be like scenarios where there's no sort of accountability or management from like the developers. There's no accountability for, I don't even want to use the term stakeholders because technically if you kickstart, you're not really a stakeholder.
Yeah, there's that, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about like the social dimensions of like, this person, I mean, everything that can go wrong on Twitter can go wrong in your, on your Kickstarter page. This guy says that you're stealing the money and not using it for art assets.
Yeah.
This person, this person drew the character, that should be a boy as a genderless, and so they're being too PC, or I mean, like you never know what kind of crazy shit's gonna happen when you have thousands of people looking at your your art or your so
Yeah, definitely when you're getting like the financial support by that, that's when people just get kind of weird. It's like when money's involved, they're like, oh, they're taking people's money and they feel like there's some kind of weird superiority aspect where they're like, oh, well,
Yeah,
let's fully
exactly.
analyze everything about this and judge it like shit. It's like, guys, we're just trying to raise money for a video game.
Yeah, everybody expects everything to be given to them online. Everything should be free.
Right. Including access to everyone's. Yeah, I mean, I would still like to do it. There's still a really good story at the heart of it, and if any developers listening to this or friends of developers listening to this want to talk to me about it, I'd be happy to consider breaking it out and working with people. I would love to tell the story that I had, or some variations on the stories that we developed in thinking about it. It actually, it actually started as a prequel, if you will, to Snatcher. In my mind, that's what it was.
Oh shit!
Oh yeah.
A prequel to Snatcher.
Go
Yeah.
on. Interested?
Yeah. But we were afraid of getting sued by Konami.
Yeah.
But the original draft of this was that there was a character named God, what was it? It was supposed to be like the great grandfather of Gillian Seed,
Hmm.
and there was going to be a character that had come over from Japan soon after Japan was opened up by Perry. So we're talking 1860s.
Yeah.
And they came to London at this time, and got involved in this Jack the Ripper type of thing. But this character was, yeah. So that was the original thought behind
That's
it.
so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope to see that again someday. It was really compelling. I wanted to see where you were going with that.
Oh, thanks.
On the localization side, I mean, we're kind of jumping back to the talk of translation and modern tools sort of taking over a bit. But another thing I wanted to ask you is, how has translation changed over time, or localization, if you will, in terms of, let me put it like this. Culture changes constantly. There's new slang, there are new references, new media, new sensibilities, new ideas. I mean, is there in a sense, do you have to constantly play catch up with culture in order to keep localization contemporary and accessible?
I think, of course, yeah. But predominantly, it's culture that is through the window of language, and language is always changing. So you have to change with the your language has to change, has to be updated. Obviously, you can't be speaking hey daddy-o,
Right.
It's kind of like when IT people have to update their skills, like learn a new programming language or something like that. Except that it's Jingo.
Yeah. You just blew my mind, daddy-o. No, so it's changing in that way. You have to keep update with the language. But I thought you were going to go to somewhere else in that conversation. I mean, the games themselves, so a translator translates the contents of the game, and so the original writer presumably has written something which itself represents a change in the culture in some way. But in translation, you're dealing with multiple cultures too. So the more interesting question for me is the cross-cultural issue of what is expected to be done with a translation, and has that expectation changed over the years?
Yeah.
The way that I see that the expectations of localization have changed is that, first of all, with the rise of the internet, people began to all look at the same thing. So the world became smaller. So originally you had these region-bound translations, the French translation, the Spanish translation, the English translation. And the fans of each of those communities were never going to talk to each other. They couldn't talk to each other.
And compare notes.
Yeah. So, yeah, they weren't comparing notes. So the original job that a translator thought that they had in games was to write game text, essentially. They referenced the Japanese, but their job was to deliver a product that was going to be entertaining. no different than an original writer of the thing. It was exactly the same job. I have to write game text. The only difference was that you had whether you had something to refer to, or you didn't have something to refer to. Do you write from scratch, or do you write from the original Japanese? But it was referring to it. And so this guy that started it all, he put in all these, cornball jokes, into the English, puns and stuff like that only the American audience would get. I'm sure listeners will say, "Oh, he's talking about that guy." I can't remember his name right
now.
Yeah. But now it's a completely different story. Now you've got people on Twitter talking about game localizers as if they're, Satan, that have changed. They exist to change and alter based upon their own egos.
I've seen some people even call it like censorship.
Yes, censorship, or and the nuttiest thing about it is that you have no idea how close we're sticking to the original now, and how tightly bound most of the projects that we work on now, because it's so easy for people to monitor our work, and for machines say, "Oh, this word is supposed to be this word," and this phrase was already translated. 88% of it looks like this, and so you look at the translation that's in the translation memory, and you say, okay, it was phrased like this, and so it's so tightly bound now, and there's so little room for creativity for most projects, unless you're an in-house translator working for Square or working for Capcom, and the development team knows that you're going to be creative, and they give you the go-ahead. Usually now what you've got is you've got translation agencies that are involved, and they're too afraid to piss anyone off. And so they say, you know what? I appreciate you trying to make this character sound funny and entertaining, but just stick to the Japanese, And so you get something which is really tends to be really flavorless.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was kind of one thing I was going to say with the localization. It's like, yeah, it's definitely part translation, but part like adding in, the flavor text without it getting too cheesy.
Exactly. So what I want to say to everyone listening is this very, very clearly, that if you ever come across anything in a translated game that is even slightly entertaining, please, please, please get down on your hands and knees and thank the fucking translator who took a risk, explored their brain for something creative, for poor compensation, for no gratitude, for no game credit, simply for the love of entertaining someone. They took that risk and wrote some entertaining text against all odds and against everyone else's wishes.
It really is against all odds.
Yeah,
that kind of gets to the heart of it too, is that when you're a translator, it's not just a mathematical formula of this word equals that word. You have to be a writer as well.
Times 1,000. Especially if you're going from fucking Japanese, which is, has no linguistic connection to English at all. So it's essentially, no, it's not even essentially. You're starting from zero linguistically. But you have an idea of the content, but there's no framework, there's no structure, if you tried to follow that Japanese sentence structure, it will sound like shit. I guarantee you 100%.
I've tried to decode it, and it pretty much ends up coming out like the sentence structure that Yoda uses. Like everything's just out of order, and I get confused. I'm
like, there's a reason that Google Translate sucks.
Yeah. So I get it. It's definitely an extra step to it. It's not just
and they put a lot of money into that. So so everybody, please, do some pushback on these idiots on Twitter that talk about translators this, and their egos are making them change what's really there. There's no mysterious secret, in the original Japanese that will help you with your sad little lives, guys. That's what we're doing. It's like we're not cutting out any mystical Oriental secrets. I promise you, we're trying to give you what's there. We're trying to give you the essence of it.
Yeah.
Now I sound like my original podcast. I'm starting to lose it. I don't know.
Nah, man, you're hitting some good points. I mean, I think a lot of people just don't realize
it's this coffee.
They're just
Getting flashbacks.
This is what we rant about all the time. It's just from a translator's perspective this week.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, and you famously, added that line in, weapons and equipment OSP.
Weapons and equipment OSP.
And like, for someone to be mad about that, hey, you just fully encapsulated like Metal Gear gameplay into a sentence. Like that's how the games were before. You always landed on each, in each scenario with no gear. And so when Snake says that, it's like, oh, we're back doing this shit again. It's like that was such a cool sentence. And so it's like that added to the experience for me. And I was the kind of kid, like when I would see an acronym, I'm looking that shit up. And so it's like when I see OSP, it's like, wait, that's not even an official acronym? Like, you made that up? How cool is that?
Yeah.
Like, so, I don't know, man. Bravo on that.
Thanks.
I mean, over 2 decades later, they're still using it.
Yeah, they're still using codec, too. Codec was supposed to be a wireless. It just says wireless. Like,
they use that in Death Stranding?
I heard that, but I couldn't find an example of it. But,
Oh, my God. I have screenshots.
It's so interesting. I just didn't think, how could Snake be using, this, like, technology that sounds like it's from the 50s? A wireless? What?
Yeah, exactly. That definitely would not have translated as well. Like, call me on your wireless, Snake. It's like, oh.
Codec is not a thing. I mean, there are things called codecs, but they're not that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I see it all the time in like just different video editing software. That's like the only time I've seen it outside of that context is it's just like a file format as a codec, but it's like,
Yeah, I mean, so I think codec that was a good piece of transcreation, I guess you would call it, because I created it. I didn't translate that. I created that.
That's amazing.
I put a screenshot of the where it says codec.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. And that's a great example. I would say that's art from adversity. Like it almost feels like you're between a rock and a hard place, right? Where you mentioned where you have to exhaust your writing skills while also fitting these cultural requirements from the original game. So OSP, I feel like is the way to like fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and handling those situations. So yeah, big ups.
When you create art, I guess I don't want to, toot my own horn too much, and I never thought of myself as an artist, but I guess it has this in common because when I wrote, when I imagined Snake saying, "You don't know how good a cigarette tastes in the morning," that was my Snake. That wasn't. First of all, that line isn't in the Japanese, and it's how I was. I was a smoker then, and I was going through this hard process, and they did, and I was right, But it's like I was reaching into myself to imbue the character with something that that I felt would, to flesh out the character, and that's the thing is fleshing out the character. But you can't flesh out a Japanese character in English because the archetypes are different. So in Japanese, there's a Japanese archetype of a cool guy, but in English we have our own archetypes, and this archetype in my mind was, it was Clint Eastwood, I guess,
And it's something that game had that I feel none of the other ones had was an element of verisimilitude. In large part because of that dialogue.
That's a $50 word.
Yeah, I forget what that
Google's
means.
verisimilitude.
It was authentic.
I've been in Japan so long.
It was believable. It was real.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, what was that word again?
And when you
verisimilitude.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you get into these later games, they sort of drift into, for lack of a better way to put it, anime style dialogue.
Right. They do.
Yeah, MGS1 definitely felt the most grounded and just believable in a character to character sense when they were talking, just like that script and dialogue.
I still just shake my head when I read "I won't cast your sorrows to the heartless sea." We're all we're all diamonds, and I just don't know. Like I don't know what I would have done if I had seen that. I would have, I would have completely changed the line. I can't. Well, I mean, you don't cast sorrows. First of all, it's a completely mixed metaphor. Sorrows, no, you can't. You literally cannot cast a sorrow. So, that is right. Did you ever hear? Did you ever hear of anyone casting sorrows? Is that a thing? Is it possible to cast? So, how did that line, happen? I mean, I looked at the Japanese, and it's a direct translation.
Son of a bitch.
But you can't.
Son of a bitch.
You can't do that. I mean, I that's a line I refuse to cross. And it's just ridiculous.
You're giving me strong Harrison Ford vibes when he was like, "You can write this shit, George, but I ain't reading it." Like, I'm getting that vibe right now, which is just great. I'm enjoying it.
But the sad thing is that there's people that say that that's a great line, and so on one level, like I can't argue with people's taste. If you feel that, and certainly what's his face got paid a lot of money for that, one line, to say that one line. He probably had to get paid a lot of money. What was his name? That actor, Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland. Yeah.
Yeah. He must have read that thing and said, "Oh shit, how am I gonna deliver this line?" But anyway, there's people that really like that line and enjoy that.
Not the best line.
That pure, unadulterated, unfiltered Kojima ness.
Where it's sort of nonsensical in English, but it sounds vaguely poetic.
Oh, wait till you hit Death Stranding and he starts talking about Princess Beach.
Yeah, so I don't know.
no.
So I suppose it's reasonable to say, who are you to think that you can, dilute, the Kojima-ness, and that's
Maybe needs a little diluting.
Yeah.
I mean, art is subjective at the end of the day, but I mean,
Yeah.
come on, like we have to have some standards. And this is your skill set. I don't see what the issue is with you saying that. It's completely
because
valid.
there's an argument over what the job description is. Is it a translator's job to But this by the way, this is an argument that has gone back to the very, very beginning of this of a translator. They've always argued about this specific issue. It always has been an issue. To what degree are you allowed to interpret something? And what's your job? So big question.
Yeah, we've talked about death of the author a few times on this episode before, and that can
that's
get
interesting. That's a really interesting conversation to have too.
Yeah. Hopefully, we don't have death of the translator. So
Death of the translator.
Oh, geez. Well, there have been entire fan debates over lines that were different in English versus Japanese. But I mean, you're always going to get like those fans who come in like the dude in The Simpsons who was arguing about the magic xylophone from Itchy and Scratchy,
I didn't see that one.
That one guy.
I think I stopped after.
I mean, there was a bit in The Simpsons where they basically made fun of this.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. I got your reference,
Yeah.
Nitroid.
What kind of shit did you talk about with Donna? I haven't listened to that yet.
Dude, Donna was a trip, man.
Dude, she called us dipshits.
Yeah, she was wild.
She's hilarious. Yeah, she's so fun.
Shout out to Donna Berg. Yeah, she's so fun.
Yeah,
like
she's
that,
hilarious.
I really do hope she does the tours that she's talking about and comes through my city, because definitely treating that woman to some hot chicken. So
Hell yeah.
You can't
be there.
have real hot chicken unless you come to Nashville, though.
yeah.
Well, where are you? Where's your hot chicken?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and Nitroid's over in Nashville where the real stuff is. So he's got me, but we got pretty good hot chicken here.
We still got the southern food though.
Yeah.
I would never have guessed you guys are Southern.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from Ohio, so I'm kind of a mess no matter where I go.
No,
I try to hide the accent during professional engagements.
I just heard it. I just heard it now.
Oh no.
Yeah, you sounded a little bit like whatever shall I do?
Oh Lord, nah.
The Southern Belle.
If you watch me in my streams, it's a little more. It peaks out a little more, but I try to keep it low when I'm talking in the podcast.
Well, there's a question for you. I mean, you've been living in Japan for how long now?
Well, on this particular stretch, I'm in my 12th year, but I've been back and forth, lived here at various other times, but I moved back here this time in 2010.
Okay, so you've been to the U.S. then fairly recently.
I haven't been back to the U.S. Last time I was back was 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's the next subject? Do we have a next subject?
We did have a question from one of our Patreon listeners. We've got from AngelusReigns, and this is a question if you don't want to take, it's fine. But he asked if Konami was working on the localization for a new Metal Gear Solid project, remake, sequel, or otherwise, and you were the translator, localizer, would you do it, and would you approach it differently than you did the localization for MGS1? That's his question.
That's a great question. I would do it. And
Konami?
I mean, I wouldn't. Listen.
Oh my god, no, I can't do the Tom Olsen shit another time. If somebody makes a blog post about this question,
he's defending
sorry,
Konami.
it's a long story,
I can't
Jeremy.
believe he's defending.
I'm not going to get into
it. Okay.
But
listen, Konami was always, they're a company, so they've always been a money grubbing entity. The year I was there, they had just fired the president and the not the CEO, mind you, that was Kozuki, but the president. They hired a banker, and this banker guy, he sat in the office watching everybody. Executives, they don't know anything about games. They don't fucking care about games. To them, they're just making widgets, And anybody that expects that somehow Konami as an entity is going to be in love with games the way that they're in love with games, it's ridiculous. So, as you can see, there's business decisions that have to be made, obviously, because they have shareholders, etc. So I think fuck Konami is a really stupid, it's a really stupid meme.
I've never typed this entire thing. Like I've seen what.
Yeah, I will, I shall, I would be involved with any project by Konami at any time, right? Because it's not Konami making it, it's like the dev team's making it, or individuals are involved in these things, and I'm an individual, so I would approach it the same way. I would start with the very best of intentions to deliver a massively entertaining and realistic sounding thing that also captured the spirit of the original and delivered everything that the original delivered to the Japanese, but delivered it to my audience, which is English speaking people, and that's my job, and it's always going to be my job. But then you get into the actual, nuts and bolts of it, and you're working with a dipshit project manager, maybe, and they say, "I noticed that you chose, I noticed that you translated, this as this, but it's actually."
Gosh, Jeremy, I have no idea who you're talking about.
So and so you run into these potential roadblocks, and then it's negotiation. Actually, there was a great book on translation by Umberto Eco, right? A great author, super intelligent guy. He wrote a book about translation, and he discusses the translation as negotiation. A negotiation between different parties, and I think that's really, really true. You're negotiating between different people. There's the needs of the audience, and there's the original writer, and then you've got sort of beyond that, you've got the kind of spirit of the idea, because even the original writer isn't exactly putting out there the real idea. The real idea is a thing that doesn't have a language, It's just an idea. But then when he expressed that idea, he can only express it through his own language. But the idea itself is a pure kind of a thing, that doesn't have language. And so are you going to translate the words that he put out there and miss the idea? Or are you going to go for the idea?
Yeah.
So this is kind of drifting into like Plato's theory of forms a bit.
Yeah, I guess it is, And so, but so you've got these really disparate interests to serve as a translator. And so it's a negotiation. And then you got to negotiate with the dipshit PM too, Yeah.
I've been on both sides of that equation.
All these dipshits getting in your way.
And now you got dipshit Twitter people too.
So many dipshits.
Yeah, it's a world of dipshits.
I mean, you increase accessibility, and now everybody's an expert.
I'm sad that we can't make "World of Dipshits" our title for this episode.
I know, actually, I think
not going to get past the filter.
That should be the title of this podcast. The World of Dipshits. I don't really think so.
That's us.
That's a quick way.
the Twitter thing is like everyone expects accessibility now, but they also there's this weird relationship with creators now, and I think Kojima has done an amazing job of navigating this. He's completely avoided this, but
Well, he's always been pretty good at, I think, curating the experience from A to Z. So
I think he's brilliant at it, and I actually think this is his genius. When you see his Twitter thing, that's the Kojima genius. That's the real Kojima genius, and I think that his brilliance as a game creator kind of went into that, and what you see now with him making games, I don't really think. For example, he's not an open type world guy. He's a closed world type guy. If you look at Snatcher or even the first Metal Gear Solid, what you'll see is a really, 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 really closed world. It's exceptionally closed. It's a world on rails, and you are driven through it on the rails from one scene to another scene. But he maintains this feeling of freedom because he gives you a little. He gives you a little freedom in certain areas. So
just enough as a treat.
Yeah, to create the illusion that you have freedom. But then when you look back on the experience, you realize, oh, I could only, the only way to kill Vulcan Raven was with that RPG or whatever. Or the only way to, hit Vulcan Raven was when, I'm sorry, I said Vulcan Raven, to hit Sniper Wolf, is when she's in between this tree and this tree or whatever, you know what I mean? It's.
Yeah, it's like a magician like forcing a card.
Right.
Like
so
you're only drawing that one card that they want you to draw, but you're like, oh, I got a whole deck to choose from. No.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's a very good metaphor. And so I think that's what he's a genius at. But that's not what open worlds are. And I've heard that he's very taken with open worlds, and maybe for that reason that he's not that type of a game creator. But Twitter. Yeah, that's an open world. I mean, that's no, it's not an open world. It's a closed world that appears as an open world. I don't know what I'm even saying anymore, but he's a genius on Twitter. That's all I can say. And then you've got these victims of the closeness between fans who, speaking of Silent Hill, everybody will know what I'm talking about. The shit show that happened with Silent Hill and that, and I think that, that fans, they have a kind of a conflicted, contradictory relationship with creators. They want them to be gods that are unapproachable, but at the same time, they want to approach them. There's this tension between that, and then when they find that they can approach this person, then they're flooded with contempt for them.
Sort of breaks the illusion.
Yeah. And entitlement and just, all right, well, cool. Now that I can talk to you, you should hear how I want you to do it. And it's like, well, I'm the creator, so.
Well, on the subject of $10 words, Days introduced me to a term, parasocial interaction, which has to do with one-sided relationships between typically fans and creators. And how unbalanced and strange those can be. I think Days could probably speak to it a little better than I could, but I get the impression you've had to deal with that a bit too on your end.
Parasocial relationships, yeah, that's really an interesting. Tell me more about that. I mean, I don't know. Have I dealt with that?
Yeah. So hopefully I'm breaking this down right, but essentially it's a phenomenon that sort of came with the age of social media, where somebody is able to leverage these social media tools to sell their personality, whether it's Twitter or Twitch, or just being like the community manager for representing like a company or a game. And what ends up happening is there's this, because it's online, there is this two-way dialogue between the fans and the creator, and there starts to become this gray area for some people where the line between discussing the content and the line between and the boundary of that person as a person starts to meld. Essentially where the logical extreme would be, I was able to talk to this content creator about like my favorite game by them, thus, you know, we're good friends, or
now we're
like
best friends. Yeah.
I'm emotionally like tied to this now. And it's okay to be emotionally tied to a piece of media. I think where it draws the line is when like you break those social boundaries with the creators themselves.
No, I get it. It's the misery relationship. You know, I'm your greatest fan.
Yeah.
The misery. Hopefully it never gets that bad. But yeah, it's like misery, but on Twitter.
Yeah. No, yeah, I get it. That I do deal with that sometimes, but I'm not really a celebrity in that sense. I'm more like a you know, extremely minor, far end of barely sort of perhaps that, you know. But even then, I do get a little bit of that. So, you know, I mean, I've had people say like, you know, your translation saved my life when I was I was about to commit suicide, or that kind of stuff like that. I get that occasionally, you know, which is fine, totally fine. But like you said, when you get into this weird thing where, because it's very hard, you know, it's very hard to deal with that. You want to treat people as, you know, as people. And so then the impulse on this side is to, you know, be like, no, you know, like when you get, you know, you're my idol, you know, I've always, you know, like, it's like talking to a God, you know, you're like, no. Come on,
No,
so
no.
tell me
Just
about
a
yourself.
dude.
You know?
Yeah.
These people also poop, okay? I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
right,
Like,
That's right.
and they don't want you near the pot when they're pooping.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say your impulse is to close that distance, right? But then, you know, the conflict is that person doesn't really want, on some level, they think they want to close that distance, but then they don't really want to close that distance because that would mean the death of their God, you know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's kind of what I've seen, like going in a lot of conventions. You just, like we were talking about it before the show, it's like you go in the green room and you see the voice actor for Duke Nukem scooping out some mashed potatoes, and you're like, oh, he's just a dude. Like,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, you ever see
Like,
you ever
I
see
just
The
met my
Man Who
hero,
Would Be
like-
King? The Man Who Would Be King with Sean Connery and Michael Caine?
Mm-mm.
Great fucking movie. The Man Who Would Be King. Highly recommended.
We'll check it out.
These two British officers in the 1800s, they go into Kazakhstan or, you know, something like that, you know. They're just regular, low-level soldiers, right? And they go there, but because of, you know, their advanced sort of technology and stuff like this, they play upon the legend of Alexander, because you know Alexander the Great, and they come at it like they're the, you know, the descendants, the revisitation of, you know, Alexander. Yeah. And so one of them begins to be worshipped as a god king, you know, and he marries a local, you know, the daughter of a local chief, you know, and she doesn't want to get married. She bites him on the cheek, you know, and he bleeds. And when they see the blood and they know that he's human, then everything turns. Everything turns, and they, you know, they cast him off a bridge and shit. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen as much in real life too. Like you have that, like, that space between you, and of course at like conventions you'll have the people that kind of like hang around and don't get the social cue, like, hey, this interaction's over, you know. But then like you can at least be like, hey, I'm gonna leave and go walk this way, you know. And then but online you just, you know, you got your block button, but then depending on how determined they are, they're like, I have an alt account, and you're like, oh boy, I can block all day. So,
Right.
Yeah.
But Kojima is not, that never happens to Kojima.
Yeah.
He's like way above that. And I don't know exactly how he did that, but it probably helps that he doesn't speak in English.
Well, he also never directly interacts with a lot of fans.
He will every once in a while, but he, for the most part, he
It's
stays
very
out of the
Very-
comments.
It's very
Yeah.
objective too.
It's almost like if he has something to say and then someone speaks to it, then he'll use that as a platform to dive off. Like didn't someone ask about like the new trailer being cut, and he was like, actually, yeah, that wasn't my trailer. You know, like he kind of like used that as the springboard to say the comment that he wanted to, like, hey,
see.
I didn't direct this trailer and cut it up. Like somebody else did it.
But he won't respond.
It's
to
more
it.
statements than conversations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
a great way to put it.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, he's not getting into back and forth and shit and like, no, this is like, he's just
See, that's a lesson
this is
I'm
the
still
statement.
learning.
He's
Yeah.
just like,
I argue on Twitter
farewell
way
sausage.
too damn much.
He's like, these egg
Send
benedicts
tweet.
looks like titties, which is I love eggs benedict.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, every once in a while you'll get strange tweets like that are just like, okay, what?
I don't know how he gets away with that shit. I mean, like anybody else would be crucified for that. I mean, you can't do that. It's so strange. But yeah, Silent Hill. I was just thinking. Lately, people have been talking about blooper.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah, we call him blooper too. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. But it's so funny. That's what caused me to bust out that that little mini rant the other day because people are already prejudging. Bloober, it's gonna suck. It's gonna ruin my life. Bloober, I can't believe they're letting Bloober touch it. Bloober's gonna do this or do that, and I'm gonna hate it. And it's not at all like the it's shitting on the legacy of Silent Hill 2. And then you point out that Silent Hill 2 was, not well received. Silent Hill 3, not well received. Silent Hill 1, not well received, They're never well received. It's only looking back that these things, it's like now people think George Bush was like a nice guy. It's like that.
Look at him. He's sitting there in the basketball stands just eating ice cream cones.
He paints.
Sweet.
He's painting. He's a nice guy. He gave fucking Michelle Obama some candy.
It is weird how time can just completely change the perception of something like that, though. Yeah, it's just
doesn't matter if he killed
even if you
100,000
lived
people.
through it. The past can
right.
still end up being seen through rose-tinted glasses.
Well, the older you were when you lived through it, the harder I think it is to fall prey to that.
Yeah.
If you're still mentally developing, then yeah. But if you already have, developed your internal compass for things, then not so much.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem with Twitter, dealing with a lot of people that have not developed that part yet. So
haven't developed several parts.
I think
arguing with kids on Twitter.
It really impedes progress.
Yeah, it's like too much noise. Like it's not. Yeah, it's just everybody talking and everybody's
no nuance.
Yeah, it impedes creativity. Because that Silent Hill team that looked at the reviews of Silent Hill 2, as a result of that, they didn't make exactly. If there was a game that they wanted to make for Silent Hill 3, then I don't think they made that. They made something that was reactionary.
Especially when you've got fans just creating petitions and coming together and you've got just these mobs that will come together and say this is the thing that we're gonna hit.
The petitions are the dumbest thing.
Kickstarter or any of those type of things. It's now you have people kind of assembling together and they can be a force. They might be the loud minority, but they will do some damage during that time. So it's yeah, it's definitely a fine balance that you got to walk with it all.
Yeah.
Well, they tie their identities to this stuff so strongly. If there's something that I don't like about this piece of media that I associate with myself so heavily, then that's also a slight against me as well.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, it kind of goes back to magical thinking.
Well, that's another subject that I think you just kind of touched upon, the fandom. I don't think that originally before social media was a thing, games were received as games and people played them individually and enjoyed them individually.
Yeah.
But there was no association of your identity with being a fan of that. And so now, arguably, it's more important when a new game comes out, your choice of which fandom you join and how that relates to your identity as a person or how you're perceived. It's arguably more important to people than the game itself. Am I right?
You kind of are.
You guys are big Kojima fans. Obviously, this is the Kojima Frequency, right? And yet, where do you guys, why are you the Kojima Frequency? I mean, is it because you were fans of Metal Gear Solid? Is it because you were fans of Snake Eater? Did you, where are you with regards to what Kojima is doing now, and what do you think about the talk about Death Stranding 2? And what do you, I'd just like to hear what you're on that.
Who wants to go first?
Do you guys want me to field this one?
Yeah.
So, I'll speak for myself here,
Okay.
and I think they share this sentiment where, we're fans of of him and his work, but being a fan of something doesn't mean that you can be a fan of something and still be openly critical of it.
Yeah. Okay.
I like pizza, right?
Yeah.
I love a good slice of pizza, but that doesn't mean I think every pizza everywhere is good just because it's pizza.
I'm super critical of pizza. I'm a pizza maniac, and nobody's harder on pizza than me.
Because you love pizza. You just
Because I
want
fucking
pizza to
love
be
it.
the best
Exactly.
pizza it can be.
Yeah.
That's how we feel.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. That's understandable.
And when it's not, we're gonna say so.
Mm.
Yeah, when somebody burns some crust or
That's very easy to understand.
yeah.
And I think to Nitroid's point though, we want to avoid kind of that crosstalk that you generally see online. Like, we want to be critical, but we don't want to be like, fuck Konami, or we want to have statements and criticisms that will be longer, that can't fit on like a bumper sticker car. Like people always say, like, don't have political opinions that fit on a bumper sticker. That's
right.
how we want to approach our commentary on Kojima and the gaming industry.
The Kojima Frequency. We've got nuance.
Judge someone not by the content of their bumper stickers, but by the quantity.
Okay. Did you guys like Death Stranding?
I liked
it had its
but
good
I
parts.
didn't.
Yeah. Yes. You can hear the hesitation. Yeah. We definitely had good and bad things to say. But
I like it as a Kojima fan, not so much as a Metal Gear fan. Like, I really, really appreciated the gameplay, but if I were somebody who was coming from the series with, specific expectations, then I can understand why people were upset.
I wish it had committed to its premise more. I felt like it was a half measure.
What was the premise?
Like, if you're gonna make a game about traversing the U.S. or let's just say a large open space, and it's it's more about the journey than the destination, and you're going through this disconnected area, then really lean into that desperation factor and don't give me things like zip lines to speed up the part of the game that you want me to be invested in.
Okay.
Hey! Don't talk shit about my zip lines.
Like, I'm getting into the dirt and grime of it, but mechanically, I just I would have liked it to have been weirder.
Okay, I have a really pointed question then.
Yeah,
it's I've often thought that with regards to gameplay versus let's just say the Kojima like verbosity. Okay, his tendency to have really long cutscenes, this kind of thing. In the past, I haven't seen that the two blend well together. It seemed to me that you've got the gameplay, the game, and then you've got this overlay of long cutscenes, which is really what Kojima wanted to do.
It's interesting how you put it that way. Let me have you finish your question. Sorry.
So I was going to say, if you can accept the premise of that question, how do you see that as having played itself out in Death Stranding? But I'm not assuming that you agree with my statement.
I'll take this one. First of all, I do agree with your statement to an extent. I think that regardless of the cutscenes, one thing I like about Kojima is, there's some, like, he takes some gameplay elements and he uses that to convey the tone or the message of his story. I'm trying to think of an example from the Metal Gear series, but like the one thing I can think of was just like, gosh. Well, let me go ahead and just jump into Death Stranding here. So Death Stranding is about traversing. It's about facing the elements, and it's about connecting with others so that you can better face said elements.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the way that game conveys that message is through the gameplay, which people called it a walking simulator, but I think it's a walking simulator in the best definition it could be, where you have to take consideration every step, every resource that you use, every shortcut you take, every hazard that you might run into. And when you're dealing with that desperation, when you finally connect with people, whether if it's, connecting on the chiral network or connecting with like an online player, because the game actually, people can help you.
Yeah.
On the game, it's sort of hard to explain, but other people can help you by leaving
I
supplies
understand. Yeah, I
when
understand.
they were going through that tough path.
Yeah.
So I think that gameplay conveys his message so well about connecting, because you are that person who's desperate, and you're naturally evoking those feelings of, oh my God, I'm connected with this person who left these chiral boots for me or some shit like that.
Yeah.
But then he also tries to convey that message with this whole story about like the president of the United City, the UCA, and Norman Reedus's character Sam trying to traverse, and the BTs and the chiral network and all these terms that are just repeated, and there's so much going on there that it kind of almost muddles the message. So to kind of summarize what I'm trying to say is, he does a good job of conveying that tone concisely, or conveying that message concisely with the gameplay, but the cutscenes are still Kojima cutscenes.
Yeah. So you think he needs a little bit more editing?
Yeah.
Death Stranding could have used an edit, but we do have the director's cut.
I beat that game twice, and I still have no idea what it was about.
Yeah, and that's like, we never got like a clear definition of what is the Death Stranding phenomenon. Like, what was, it's just like, oh, it's a supernatural phenomenon thing that happened, and here we are. And it's like, well, damn it.
If I had to sum up this game, I would call it forcefully enigmatic.
Well, you know what that reminds me of? What was the quote unquote sequel to Alien with the albino giant? What was that movie?
Oh, shit.
Prometheus?
Yeah. Prometheus, yeah. So
yeah,
I have this kind of like my own personal feeling about Prometheus and some people's way that they approach, let's call it world building. And for me, Prometheus is indicative of, one extreme example. And for example, something like Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, is an extreme example of the other side. And so for me, you can build up from the ground up. In the case of Tolkien, he was a linguist, and so he built it from the languages. That was what he was interested in Elvish, for example. And then he kind of had to create a world that supported the language. The world grew organically from the language, and so it had this deep structure,
Yeah.
The world, and it took an enormous amount of time. But it, as a result, it retained incredible consistency throughout it.
Yeah. Versus like adding stuff in as a retcon that then like muddies up the timeline a little bit. Now we have to reconsider, like, when are we looking at this fact? Like, are we looking at it before MGS2 came out, or are we looking at it before any of the PlayStation games came out? Because the story changes. If
you start with images, for example, instead of language, like I just, I had this dream about, oil dripping down a dude's face, and then I went from there. And then I asked myself, well, what is this oil dripping down from a dude's face? That's, and then I realized, it could be a slime from a, thing. And then, and then what's that thing? And then that thing is this. That's top down stuff. And then what you wind up with is a lot of holes because there's no internal logic to it. It's all based on imagery. And I think Prometheus was something like that.
Yeah.
Why is there a biologist who, doesn't act like a biologist, like,
It's to put it another way, if I'm understanding you right, it's almost like the Rosetta Stone version of world building, where it kind of throws you into the deep end and expects you to pick it up.
Yeah. Except that the Rosetta Stone is a representation of an existing reality. I mean, those languages exist. So, I guess my question is, and it's the same thing with Silent Hill, for example, how I was referring to before about the lore. The thing is that if you look at it from the outside, you can imagine just like we were talking about filling in the blanks. You can imagine that there was a deep lore that made, consistent sense, about the world of Silent Hill and the gods, And but the truth is that there is no consistency and there is no well thought out world.
Yeah, and two, at the time, you don't even know if a sequel is coming.
Yeah,
right?
and maybe and from the standpoint of entertainment, sometimes the illusion is enough. It is enough because you'll fill in those spaces, but it doesn't mean that there is a reality to that world. And so I am wondering whether or not that Death Stranding is something like that. You've got this, this imagery and stuff like that, and the fans can fill in the blanks and they can imagine that it's a real concrete world, but it's not. It doesn't actually make any sense because it's sleight of hand magician stuff here. Take any card you want, but
Yeah. Here's your ha and your ka.
And that was kind of my biggest issue with the game, more or less, was that I never felt anchored to anything in it.
Right.
I never really got a feel for what was going on or where I was or what the gravity of these situations were,
right,
or why I should care about any of these characters. I never had that anchoring moment early on that made me go, okay, I understand this world now, so I can start to sort of build that understanding.
Yeah.
Build those emotional connections and try to relate to these things because it's so far detached from anything familiar that I just can't relate to it.
I think complexity has to grow from simplicity. That's the organic growth. Complexity evolves, but if you just start with complexity and you've never gone through the earlier stages, then you just wind up with kind of a tangled mess,
Yeah, like even as I used to like deliver pizzas, and it's like even that I wasn't really like empathizing. Like, cool, I'm a delivery man, like Sam. It's just it didn't really translate. Like even with that, I don't know, something was missing.
And they straight up have you deliver pizza in that game.
I know. That's why I was like, nope. I think I prefer the Domino's experience.
Man,
better graphics.
Fuck that guy. No spoilers, but fuck that guy.
That pizza guy, yeah.
Can I ask a bit of a non sequitur?
Yeah.
This has been on my mind this whole time.
So looking at your repertoire, Jeremy, I do know that you worked on like Pokemon, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I did.
And there's a scene towards the beginning of the series where it's raining and the main characters are running and trying to get out of the rain, and Brock, who is the group chef, picks up his pan and says, "I'm going to turn this frying pan," puts it on his head, into a drying pan. And he avoids the rain. Was that you?
That's great. No, it wasn't, but I love it. It's brilliant.
Damn. That is a good line.
I was like, oh my God, if the Metal Gear
No, that's fucking brilliant. No, I mean, I'm just like trying to imagine what the original Japanese was. Assuming that it was, I mean, visually, if he's putting the frying pan on his head, he probably said something the same in Japanese, but nothing occurs to me in the Japanese language that a pun that would make it like that. So to me, that's brilliant. It's just absolutely. I wish it was me. It's like to have arrived at that particular pun. It's a stroke of It's like that's so good. I mean, frying pan, drying pan. It's it's so unimportant and it's so insignificant and it's so tiny. But it's like a moment like that. If you're the translator who did that, it's like hitting fucking grand slam in the World Series. But like nobody's watching.
That's the OSP of Pokemon right there.
It is, but I got credit for OSP. This is like unrecognized brilliance. Whoever did that. I would like to give him a big hug and buy him some flowers or her or them. Yeah, that's great. Frying pan, drying pan, so good.
Classic.
Legends of Localization.
Yeah. That person deserves it.
Well, you are definitely one of those legends. Not to blow smoke, but we definitely have appreciated your work and all the games and stuff that you've put your touch on, and we thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It was
a lot of fun.
A great time talking to you.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
It's good getting to talk to you again, and this has been a blast.
Ryan's conscience is now
Seriously.
clear now. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, good. He didn't get in trouble. All
clear.
right, I can finally start
I've
to move
learned
on.
so-
There was a while there where I thought you might have hated us. For
A world?
that
No,
podcast.
no.
I was so
Never.
dude, when you were up in there and you were like, "What are your names?" and I was like,
Oh, God.
but
No.
no, it was really chill.
No.
I was an honor. I've learned so much, and I've been such a big fan, even when I didn't know I was a fan. So thank you again for dropping by.
Thank you. And remember, a world of dipshits.
Yeah.
Absolutely, world of dipshits.
It was great. Yeah, thanks for asking me to be on.
Yeah, and if you want to plug your website and your Twitter, if you want people to interact
Oh,
with you
yeah,
on there,
absolutely.
you can plug all that stuff.
Yeah, well, let me just say something about my company.
Yeah, go ahead.
I started Dragonbaby last year. We're a localization company focusing on games and other entertainment. We translate from all languages into all languages, specializing in Asian languages, super specializing in Japanese to English, as you can imagine. We work with game companies, and we also work with other translation agencies in a support role. And we give it our all. So if you know anyone who needs localization, whether that be small scale Steam stuff or a friend that has a desirable position in a gaming company, please let them know that we're out there at dragonbaby.com, and they can reach me at jblaustein@dragonbaby.com, and I'm open to any inquiries. So thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely be sending people your way.
Awesome.
Here.
Great.
No, they'll be in good hands. So
Terrific.
it's been a blast. We'll let you go here, but yeah, thank you again so much.